Talk Live. Tonight we're going to pair with another architect and interview Matt Imperto from Philadelphia, who's another architect, and I'm going to interview him and talk about all things architecture. I welcome and thank you for joining me today on this. This is great. And for those of you that have just checked in, I'm 69. I'll be 70 this summer. And I'm learning this is the first TikTok Live we've done, interviewing two people or one person at the night. And I'm loving TikTok. So,
and Matt's half your age.
Matt, you're half my age, but that's all right. I don't have any of the ink that you have on my arms, but
so that means you must be 62 then. I'm 31.
There you go.
There you go.
I'm 69. So, so at any rate, Matt talked about what inspired him to become an architect, to study architecture, and basically he credits Legos and that whole experience, Star Wars, and since we are on Star Wars, would you please explain the ink on your right arm?
Well, it's actually mirrored, so it's my left arm.
Oh, that's your left arm. Okay.
It's just a mishmash of my favorite Star Wars stuff. This was my first tattoo. It was kind of the Death Star and an X-wing and some TIE fighters, but it's all the ships. Like that kind of proves what I was talking about before. Is it's a lot of the ships. We got a walker there. There's a planet here. I got a bunch of random stuff, more TIE fighters and space battles and stuff. But yeah, that's like, it really was. I think subconsciously the design of everything in Star Wars, just, on Tatooine, it's a desert planet and they have these little kind of earth adobe huts. And then on the Death Star, it's this like super modern, it's funded by the Empire, and obviously they have infinite funds, so it's like super high tech. And I don't know, maybe I think it did some subconscious programming in the back of my head. So.
All right, well, that's great. That's great. Well, it's clear that you're when you get interested in something, you become wholly committed, right?
Yes.
You're all in. Well, when you got out of architectural school, tell me about your first job as an architect.
Yeah, so I had a few internships during college, but it was very different. A summer internship is really different than graduating and working full time in a firm. So the firm that I worked at, I was working there for I think my last semester or two, and then when I graduated, I kind of segued right into full time employment, and it was interesting. I think it opened my eyes to kind of the realities of architecture in terms of budgets, in terms of different client types and their particular appetite for certain design decisions,
Right.
as well as just working with other architects and their appetites for certain decisions and certain ways of thinking. I was exposed to definitely the more conceptual, I don't want to say ambitious because that could be condescending, but more, let's push the boundary. Let's try to do something really great and creative. And I also worked with people who were kind of the opposite, and it was like very technically oriented. Their brains would immediately go to detailing and cost and how this thing is going to get built. And both of those things are important, right? You need both. But I guess it just kind of took what I learned in architecture school and almost turned it upside down in a way. You know, there were times where I would work on proposals, when we were trying to win a project,
Right.
and I would be working with the principals and we would do renderings and we would do models. And there were definitely moments where I was like, oh, this feels like architecture school. And then you have the moments when you're working on ADA toilet room designs and you're working on roof replacement jobs and window replacement jobs for K-12 schools. So you have to go out, you have to survey every window, you have to survey all the roof conditions, all the parapets, like when you're coming out of architecture school and you're expecting this kind of glamorous profession, and then you're counting and measuring windows and you're assembling all these different details, it really takes your 5 years of schooling, and it, like I said, it just turns it on its head. Um, so, but it was a stepping stone, definitely, because I think in that moment I realized that K-12 and higher education and senior living is kind of not my realm. And then after that, I moved into residential, and I was like, okay, this is definitely where I belong. So,
All right, no, that's great. Well, I want to interrupt for just a second. Javier Fuentes, architect Fuentes, who both you and I follow, is online. So welcome, and happy to have you here. Let me see. Your with your the first job you had was just in, but doing, you said, senior housing.
it
And
was a
measure.
combination of we did a lot of K-12 schooling, we did a lot of higher ed, and some senior living stuff. So I kind of got exposed to a little bit of those three market sectors.
Right. Well, now that you're doing residential architecture, can you explain the some of the subtle differences or even big differences of feedback you receive from the client and your designs when you do residential work?
Yeah. So when you're working, so the client base is very different. When you're working with, just say, higher ed, you're working with employees of a college, of an institution, and they have different goals than a client who is managing the renovation of a K-12 project, because that project is using tax dollars. And there's going to be a referendum, a public vote on the project. So right off the bat, those two client kind of avatars are very different in terms of what their goals are and what they want out of the project. Senior living, I didn't spend as much time in, so I can't really speak to that. But then, moving into residential, specifically with homeowners, when you're designing a house for a young couple, that's gonna have their home that they're gonna, live in, and spend time in their family, and they're gonna fantasize their life, living in this thing that you're working on. It gets very emotional. Um, and it's funny, in my when I was working on single family houses, I really didn't have many of those clients, but I saw that, I saw that happening. Many of my clients were developers. So the developer mind for a single family house is, again, very different than a homeowner client. Developer is, I'm going to build this to rent, or I'm going to build this to flip. So I need the material palette to be palatable to a general audience. I need it to be, kind of general, but still kind of unique and, um, not luxurious, but, you want it to stand out. You want it to have character. Um, and then when you go up in scale to the multifamily stuff, it's kind of that same avatar as the residential developer. It's all about, from the beginning, it's all about numbers. If the project doesn't work on an Excel spreadsheet, then it's not gonna, then you're not gonna have a project. um, so even, what did I just name there? There's 5 different avatars, like for, 5 different potential clients. They're all very different, but I still think my brain kind of gravitates towards that residential client discussion and feedback, just much easier. It comes more natural to me for whatever reason.
Well, I share that same sort of desire to have the feedback come to me from the users, and so that when I draw something, it's appreciated by the end user. And when you do, I found when I did commercial projects or larger scale projects, uh, the user was removed from the whole process, and that's who I wanted
Right.
to really affect. And so I made the decision. Actually, they made the decision while I was still a professor at architecture to embrace doing residential renovations, which I used to give slideshows at AIA conferences, and I would show the sort of the evolution of man, and they'd have the little blob, and then it would grow legs or fins, and it would come up out of the water, and it would start to crawl, and then it would start to walk. It was a little chimpanzee, then it would be an ape and whatever, and then finally it would be Homo sapien. I said, well, the other architects at the AIA conventions were the Homo sapiens. I was just a little chimpanzee. I was doing residential renovations, and I took the humble pill so I could study it, and because I got so much satisfaction out of designing, which I can now articulate to the end user. And when I talk with other architects that have a bunch of friends, and say even in New York, that do very tall buildings, and they talk about the millions of people their projects affect. I said that's correct, but you affect millions of people, but just for a split second. And the stuff I design, all right, it affects people intimately. I mean, it affects their lives. It helps them carry out their lives. And so I gave a photographer analogy that, theirs is a fast speed, real quick click on a camera with very high speed film. Whereas mine is more like an Ansel Adams. You take a piece of film, you put it in a box, and you put a tiny little hole, and you expose it for a long period of time. And the resolution is just incredible. And that's the depth that I strive for as a residential architect. So,
question. So, when you started doing renovations, you said you were working as a professor?
yes.
So did you, that was kind of the beginning of your own practice, was starting renovation work, and then it grew into a client base and consistent work?
It did. And I was a professor for 10 years, and I started off working for another firm in town. I was just not satisfied with the avatars that they were dealing with, and figured that, okay, I would go and do some historic preservation. So I found some plantation houses that needed lots of renovation work and preservation work. And so they hired me. And then I found out very quickly that, at least in the 1980s, most of the people that owned these plantations lost their money, I mean, decades, generations ago. And so they had these white elephants, these gorgeous houses that they couldn't afford to maintain. And if they can't afford to maintain them, well, guess who else they can't afford? And that's the architect. And so I started doing renovations and said, okay, even if it's not historic, I want to approach it as if it were a very, very special building. And no matter how humble it was, let me take it as if it had its own character, its own spirit. And how am I going to renovate it, maintain that spirit, improve it, and so it just becomes a bigger, better house when I'm all done. And so I did one house, and then he told all his buddies, and I had some more houses, and then things began to progress, and my reputation got bigger and bigger. All the while I was sort of a gentleman architect, because my wife was a practicing attorney, and we were doing fine. I had kids to feed. My wife decided that the law practice was not for her, and told me that I needed to work full time. I said, "Wait, I'm teaching full time, and I have this part time practice." And she said, "Yeah, but you're making more money with the part time practice than you are teaching." And although I was enjoying teaching, she was right. It was not bringing in near the income that the practice was. So I went to the dean and said, "I'm out of here. Thank you very much." And so I resigned, and I started my practice full time. And it's been wonderful since then. Now, TikTok has allowed me to sort of scratch a little bit of the itch of teaching, which I enjoyed immensely. And so that's, I'm not selling anything on TikTok. I'm just sharing knowledge and sharing experience, and I'm happy to do that. So,
and you're great at it, by the way. You're really good.
Oh,
I
well,
love your
thank you.
videos.
And I enjoy what you do. We've got a comment from Kevin Cognier. How hard is it to pass the state test to be an architect? And it's in most states, very few states have their own exam. Most of the exams, most of the states actually use the NCARB exam, or National Council for Architectural Registration Boards. And it's a standardized test, or it's 6 of them now. They're very difficult to pass. And Matt, actually, you have a whole series of TikToks on advice on how to pass that exam. So, Matt, let me let you answer that question. How hard is it to pass the state test to be an architect?
It's hard. It was hard for me. I'm a very bad test taker. I failed a total of 5 times. That being said, I know people, somebody that I worked with that's my age, passed all the exams on the first try, all 6. Boom.
Right.
Within, I think it was like 4 months, 4 or 5 months. Boom,
Right.
boom, 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 boom. He crushed it. I failed the first one
Look,
I took.
nobody asked you how many times you failed.
Right. No, exactly. I say it as an encouragement because failing those exams really, yeah, failed for the 4th time, failed the 4th for the first time last month. Like failing really hurts. It hurts it makes you question yourself. It makes you question your abilities. It makes you question, the birthdays that you skip out on and all of the time that you invest in studying and thinking that you know the exam and then taking the exam and feeling confident and then getting yeah get, getting that fail report at the end of the exam and then it
Right.
hurts.
We're getting comments. Chief by a billion failed the 4th for the first time last month. All right, there you go. Go for it, man. Keep trying. Keep
Yeah,
trying.
keep doing it.
And the next one, Kevin asked, would you say math is a big part or knowing how to find information? Matt?
Yeah, it's more knowing how to find the information specifically for the case studies. It helps if you have experience knowing where things are in the building code so that you can, when you're asked a building code question, you can quickly go to that section and find it.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that comes with time. Like I'm only recently starting to be like, oh yeah, occupant loads. Like I know exactly where, it takes a lot of time because there's so much. But the math portion, it's pretty minimal. You don't have to memorize. There's some calculations you have to know for certain exams, but overall, I think if you're not great at math, it's not a big deal because you also have a calculator on the screen. It's more so knowing the formulas and how to apply them. And like I said, even in certain situations, they sometimes give you the formulas. So I wouldn't be too scared of the math.
Okay. Another question or comment. Do you ever regret your career choice? Burned out 12 years architect here. Okay, I've been practicing for 43 years coming up this year.
I want you to answer
Not burned out. All right. All right. So, uh, yeah, I have no regrets. And so, Matt, do you have any regrets?
I don't have any regrets. I do feel the burnout though, and my biggest issue with this profession is, and I'm curious as to your thoughts. I just find that I really just hate being in a desk for most of my day, most of my work day. I have a lot of energy. I need to get up and move around like at least like once an hour. I
Right.
find that the sedentary nature of what we do sometimes it's a little frustrating. I like to be active. I like to, like when I was working on my fence, I was like building my cedar fence. I was like working out details in real time. I was like, oh, I'll do this corner here. And I'm outside and it's nice out, and I'm watching things go up in that moment. It's instant gratification. And I feel
Right.
like in architecture, you don't really get that instant gratification because you could be working on a project for months and you don't see it go under construction for sometimes years. And God forbid it, they have to cut corners or there's cost savings and things don't turn out the way you like. Some of those moments have been kind of disappointing, but I wouldn't say I regret anything.
Now, Now, the type of practice that you join, or the type of firm that you decide to work for or work with,
Share that Harvard study.
is going to depend on that's going to determine how much time you spend at your desk versus how much time you spend outside, or which role, if you're in a larger firm, which role you have. Because some architects, when they work for a larger firm, their whole job is just checking construction sites. And so they are outside all the time, but versus drawing. And if you want the whole mix of designing, drawing, job site checking, dealing with clients directly, it works, I found, great doing residential in a small firm, I have a small firm by choice. Now on the ARE exam, which is the architectural registration exam, do you have any study strategies? Or did you find anything more helpful than any other approach?
Yeah, I think the best study strategies for me are to mix up your media that you consume, right? Because you can sit there and read architect's student handbook for professional practice or whatever it's called. You can read that until you know every word. But for me personally, it helps to implement a combination of reading, practice quizzes, practice exams for the test taking muscle memory, videos. You can learn YouTube University. Like YouTube has playlists for each ARE exam. You watch a foundation get poured for a house build, and you could learn more about that topic than reading in a book.
Right.
So you have text, you have exams, you have video, and even podcasts for construction and evaluation. Um, there's the Schiff Harden lectures, which I listen to a lot. He was a practicing attorney, so he has a really good perspective on contract law and litigation and liability, which those things are going to be huge for the professional practice exams. So I would say, yeah, mix up media. That's huge, and get into a good routine. Um,
That's good advice. Have you ever heard of the Amber Book in that series?
I have heard of Amber Book, yes.
All right. About 4 or 5 years ago, one of my staff suggested that, or asked if I would sponsor the Amber Book, because you could, subscribe to it, and then everybody in the firm could use it that was not licensed yet. And he received. He did the Amber Book. It's the mixed media. I mean, there's about an inch and a half paperback book you get with all the test questions and reading materials. Of course, it references codes as well that you have to supplement that. But then it has videos, and it has sample tests. And one of the things I like about it, being a principal of a small firm, is that my staff that are taking advantage of that subscription, they can't access it unless they've already scheduled an exam, one of the 6 exams. All right, and so it forces them to take the exams, to study for them. Even if they fail it, that's fine, but they're still studying for it. They cannot access the materials until they do that, and it has been so much faster. I mean, I had one intern work for me for 10 years. 10 years, and he never got his license. He was just like floundering with
Schedule
didn't even schedule the exams. And so I gave him an ultimatum, and he was an excellent employee. I said, you either sign up for one exam a quarter, or you're out. He said, are you threatening me? I said, yes, because you spent 5 years in school, and then you're going to come here and spend another 10 years, and you're not trying to get licensed. This is crazy. And some of the staff I told that to, they left. Some of them got licensed and then left. But the Amber Book, they got licensed, and I love this guy forever. And he, unfortunately, his girlfriend moved to Los Angeles. I live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so he followed his girlfriend. So he's working now for a great firm in Los Angeles doing residential architecture. But he's the one that turned me on to Amber Book, and I've had it since then. And all my staff, I have one who's passed 5 of 6 exams, and that sixth one, I'm not sure which number it is, but it is just a killer. It's not structure, so it's not the math one. It's
Yeah.
I think
PDD, project design and documentation,
yes.
or is it
No,
PA,
I think
programming analysis?
it's program analysis or something. But whichever one it is, I've had three interns. All have like tripped over the threshold of that exam, and one last week passed it, and so sometime next month another one should pass it. And I've got a new intern I'm encouraging him to get on Amber Book. He's got all the materials, and so he's studying it with it. But that's an excellent program, great videos, and if you're studying for the ARE exam, consider getting it. Or if you're with a firm, talk to the firm principal and say, finance it for me, right? Because one of the things I do as an architect is I pay for all the exams. I'll pay for the registration. If they join the AIA, I pay those dues and all that stuff. But the important thing is I want them to grow, because they're not drafting fodder, in my office. They're growing, they're learning. I'm 70, so at some point I'd rather not just vaporize and dust and go away. I'd like to be able to hand something to somebody, And so
Fair enough.
That's the current plan. So I have an LSU student that's working for me now, who, while she's a student, she's studying Amber Book.
She gets her ARE credit.
And she gets her ARE credits also
for her office stuff.
For her office stuff, because I've got her doing actually things, administrative tasks in the office that if you just graduate and go work for another firm, then you're not going to see that side of the office. Because I actually have her sitting at my front desk, and she's just in part-time, but she gets that exposure of the architectural profession from that viewpoint versus just draw, and
right.
So it's and in my firm, you have to be able to do everything, including taking out the trash. We have somebody that cleans our toilets, but if they're late, then yep, that's us too.
That's that small firm wear every hat mentality. I worked in a small firm of 9 people, or eight or 9 people, and I think every architect should work in a small firm at some point, because it really is. It's so important to be that person that's answering the phone call and saying, somebody on the other line is saying, "Hey, I'm looking at a site here. What can I do with this piece of property?" And at my previous job, that's what I was doing. I would answer the phone call. Guy would be like, "Hey, I'm looking at this parcel," and I would have to pull it up on the Philly Atlas and see what it's zoned for, and have to try to talk with these people and try to kind of secure the job, because that's my income right there. That's this job is going to keep us employed. And when you're at a big firm, you don't think about that stuff as often, but it's valuable.
Right. Well, in 1985, again, I'm dating myself, the AIA did a study on the business of architecture. And for a period of maybe 10 years, they had it in the Architect's Handbook. But what they did is they contracted with the Harvard Business School, and they said, help us with the business of architecture. And so if you've had any crossings with anyone from the Harvard Business School, they make decisions very quickly because they've learned how to put people, things, tasks, businesses, etc., all in cubbyholes. And so there were 2 questions that they asked. One question was, you're an architect, why do you practice architecture? You're a client, why do you pick an architect? And so what they came up with was a very simple graph, and the architects had two answers to that question. One was, we practice architecture for the practice of architecture, the art of architecture, that whole experience. The other half, or the other answer to that question was, we practice architecture because it's good business. So we're in it for the business of architecture versus the practice of architecture, all right? So those are two, put those on one side and make those the vertical two columns. There we go. This is the wrong pen for it.
You're holding the right
Oh,
pen.
there we go. I got a pen. All right, my assistant is giving me a pen, right? So we got the business and practice.
Having burnout, this could help.
But anybody that's having burnout, this will help you understand things. So is that correct, or are you seeing it backwards?
It's mirrored.
Ah,
I can fix that. I can fix that.
we're going to
Weird
fix
for me,
it. Hang
at
on
least.
one
No, no,
second.
keep talking.
Everybody else.
All right, so let me chart real quick, or try to give it to you quickly. So we've got now when the owners were asked, why do you practice architecture, or why do you pick an architect, the biggest piece of the pie was for delivery. And delivery means, if you can't do it, I'll hire somebody else. I want it on time and on budget, period. Those are the criteria, all right? And so that's for the delivery. The second question, or the second answer to the question, why do you even hire an architect, is for service. And in service, the owners realize it matters now who you pick as an architect, because your service is going to be different. So the types of projects in service are going to be houses. It's going to be custom items and small commercial. For delivery, it's developer stuff. It's high rises, it's hospitals, it's apartment complexes, and things of that nature. It's a larger scale projects, but it's delivery, and it's money driven, and that is exactly what drives it. Service is the architect begins to matter as far as the product you get. And then the third reason to hire an architect is for what they call the high idea. Okay, and the high idea, that's what you study in school, right? That's the concept. So here we go. We got read it correctly now. Here we go. We got high idea, service, and delivery. These are the three reasons clients hire architects, all right? Most of the bulk of the dollars are in delivery. There's a lot of dollars in service, and there's very few. It's only 10% of the fee dollars nationally are in high idea. Okay? Now, take this. All firms can do all three of those, all right? Because they're going after clients, all right? And so the two types of why the architects practice, they practice for the practice of architecture or the business of architecture, okay? So it's either the practice or the business of architecture. And then if you extend these boxes, you end up with 6 boxes. All right? And the most helpful thing for me to decide when I leaped from being a professor to being an architect for real, right, was the advice that you can pick 2 boxes. They have to be adjacent, and you can only live in 2. Otherwise, you spread yourself too thin.
Hmm.
Right? And so,
It also explained why you look different at cocktail parties.
and I look, I look very different at cocktail parties, according to my wife. Right? I believe in service. That's what I want to do. I've got, my graduate degree, and I was a professor for 10 years. So I want to do high idea, but practice. That's why I'm an architect. Now, I'm not in the business, I'm not in the profession as a business just to make money. Okay.
Right.
And so if you can kind of digest those two questions of why you practice an architect, why you practice architecture, and the three answers of why clients pick architects, it gives you 6 boxes. And which 2 would you like to live in?
Well, and also,
And so,
like 75% is in delivery.
okay, it's nationally 75% or no 70% of the fee dollars are in delivery. All right, that's the bulk. That's what drives most firms. Right? It's certainly the big firms. It's the dollars in delivery. Then you have service. It's about 20%. And then the last 10% are high idea.
Would you agree that you might align practice with passion then and business with money? Like in the practice column, it's more so what you're getting at is a passion for the practice and, iteration and all this great,
Well,
great
sure.
And you don't
fundamentals
have
of
the
architecture.
personality to work for a big firm.
I don't have the personality to work for a big firm. I mean, when I got out of graduate school, I had designed one house and one renovation. One was historic, one was a chambered nautilus that was 5 stories tall, and it got built. Both got built. And I went to SOM and showed them my drawings for what I could do. And they politely took my portfolio and slid it across the table back to me, and they said, "We don't do that." I had no idea what they were talking about.
Yikes.
And then it wasn't until I graduated from graduate school in 1980. It wasn't until '85 that the state architects sponsored a seminar on this Harvard study, which I thought was fabulous. And I sat in the front of the room and realized very quickly with the few questions that the moderator was asking, I was the only one with my hand still up, which set me apart from all the other architects. They were all interested in delivery.
And that's not a bad thing.
And it's not a bad thing. They're good people I grew up with. I grew up in Baton Rouge. But I was interested in the service or high idea. And so the moderator said, "Well, that's good, but this seminar is not for you, Kevin."
There's more money in the other.
There's more money in the others. Now, having said that, Matt, I have 3 daughters. I put them through private school from pre-K through college. They graduated with no debt. They had a car. They were in sorority. I now have a convertible BMW because I paid for the 3rd wedding, and it's done.
Oh, man.
I'm all good. I'm all good. But with a practice-centered practice, doing custom residential, I was able to pay for all of that, and have 3 daughters, and I now have 7 grandkids. Number 8 is coming any minute now. We don't know for sure. I'm on call for that. And number 9 will be this June.
But people that get burned out, they
Wow.
get one type of firm.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
if you get burned out, you're probably, without knowing about it, you're in the wrong firm, the wrong box, and it's going to make you miserable.
I think a lot of people also, architecture as a field has a very high turnover. When you're in college, you know, from year 1 to year 5, I forget what the statistic is, but so many people drop out because it's so rigorous and it's so hard, it's so challenging.
Right.
And then even after college, when people go to work at a firm, and I'm transparent. My starting salary was 40K when I graduated college, and when I was living home with my parents, it's like, sure, that's okay. But, you know, after working as hard as I did in college, and I think many other people my age would agree with this, you feel kind of blindsided, when you get that, when you realize in proportion to what other people, make. I think it's a hot topic in our profession, definitely. Um, which also could be tied to a firm issue, because you could go work for a developer, you can go work for a general contractor, and
Sure.
probably make more money than working in a boutique architecture firm that's focused on design. And I think that kind of ties back to what you were talking about with that chart, because then you're kind of switching to a more contractors and developers. They're more worried. They're more focused on delivery. They're more focused on getting a product as soon as possible because they have a construction loan with an interest rate. So
Right.
they need to
Right.
get drawings fast, and they need it to be code compliant, and they need it to be accessible, and they need it to be moderately attractive compared to whatever else is getting built, which,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Right.
right
Now,
now isn't the standard. Uh-huh.
when I was coming out of school, uh, all big firms had, they had high idea projects, award-winning projects, and but the bulk of the firm was for business, and it was just that one of the partners was the one that did all the design work, and they weren't interested in your great ideas coming out.
Right.
And so it's instead of being turned off by it was informative to me. I mean, when shortly after, actually before I graduated, I had graduated. I was taking the ARE exams, which when I took them
In the dark ages.
in the dark ages, we actually had pencil and paper, and we had to show up and draft for a full 1 day exam that started at 7:30 in the morning and went till 7 at night. It was a 12-hour exam, just the design part, and then the 6 months later you had the written part, and it was 5 days in a row. You had it was written exams, right? So it was quite a commitment just taking the exams. But if you failed it, you had to wait a full year to take the other part, right? So at any rate, the night before we were taking the design exam, it was a Friday. Philip Johnson was speaking, and so we went, and his advice to us, because he knew we were all going to go take the exam the next morning. He said, if you're going to practice architecture, you need to be rich. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable.
It's a bit of a bummer.
Well, that was a bummer. It's like, oh, I'm not rich. And he said, but that's okay. You can marry rich, right? Well, that's also a bummer. I married for love. So anyway, back to Matt here. So any tips you could give high schoolers that are interested in architecture?
High schoolers. Oh man. I think picking the right college is very important, um, because I think your architecture school will set the tone for your career. I think it's going to set the trajectory for what you value, and what you bring to the table. Because there's a scale, right? You can go to a more conceptual, high design school, right? Like Pratt, for example, um, has the reputation of being like a super high concept. Um, I don't want to call it like an art school, but it's more focused on the arts of architecture as opposed to NJIT, which is very technically grounded. Um, I went to Philadelphia University, which I feel like was somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
We learned wall sections, we learned construction details. We learned a little bit of Revit, a little bit of software, but they also pushed, drawing. They pushed um, model making, and it was a balance. And it's not hard to find this information. I'm sure there's a Reddit thread on it, but just ask around in the community, like kind of what people's opinions are on certain colleges. Interview at different colleges, and kind of get a sense of their philosophy because it's important, um, and it's gonna it'll have a direct impact on um, you know your employability after college. I know that in Philadelphia, where I work, um, if you are a practicing architect and you went to college in Philly, it's like you went to Drexel, Philly U, or Temple, or like UPenn. So those are like the big four. And it's funny, certain firms seem to, like, certain people tend to gravitate towards certain firms for whatever reason. Like we have a decent amount of Philly U people at my office, but yeah, picking your college is definitely the most important decision. If it wasn't already obvious.
Right, right, right. Well, it's obvious now, but it was not obvious to me when I was an undergraduate. I can tell you that for sure. So let's take a few questions from the
Yeah,
our
yeah. There's some good discussion going on here.
some great. So, how many models have you made since high school or since school? I've made a ton. I
I
don't know about you.
I've made a few actually. N- when I worked at Spiesel, we would make little chipboard models. We had a 3D printer, so we would make like little massing models that we would submit with proposals. Um, so a handful of times, not it wasn't infrequent. And even now in my current firm, which somebody in the comments actually I work with, which is funny, we make little 3D printed models. I think that was kind of more of an intern thing, though. The intern was working on the 3D print files and printing out the models, but it was all for internal use to kind of study. And um, it wasn't anything that we're presenting to a client. At least I don't think. But
Okay. Have, uh, have you made many models since, or what? How do you design today? Let me ask you that. What technology do you use?
uh, Revit. Okay, I try not to design in Revit, because I think a lot of the buildings that you see nowadays look like they were designed in Revit, and I think a lot of people in the industry agree that it's an issue, because you could just click the edit profile option and you can, make all of the Tetris shapes, and I think that's why people are, in my opinion, very disenfranchised with modern architecture. But anyway, um, I try to hand sketch as much as I can. Early on, I try to hand sketch and I try to use SketchUp. I like SketchUp because it's more like digital sketching. But then once we go into like SDDD, it's Revit. I use Lumion to render, Photoshop sometimes if I want to do some post production. But that's kind of it.
Okay. Well, by comparison, I use ArchiCAD, and I've arrived at ArchiCAD after going through at least five different other programs at great expense. And this was all passed when I went from hand drafting to computers and CAD drawing. All right. And ArchiCAD does 3D, but it does all the things that you talked about. It'll do post production. It'll give me a model that I can show my clients in 3D and let them have it on their cell phone, even a virtual walkthrough that they control.
Mm.
I give that same. It's called BIMX. It comes with ArchiCAD. Uh, I give it to the subcontractors and the contractor, so they get to see exactly what I'm asking them to build for us. All right. ArchiCAD is not widely adopted in the United States. It's certainly not into the schools yet. It should be, and I'm encouraging as many architectural students as possible to get involved with ArchiCAD because it gives you the 3D model. And in all honesty, I haven't built a cardboard model since I got ArchiCAD. It's about 15 years ago. Uh, the the models that it gives me are realistic, and I get that instant gratification. I used to, back in the pencil and paper days, I still sketch, but it would take me a week to do a presentation perspective, and in ArchiCAD, it gives it to me in seconds. So with that, Matt, can you give me some essential skills for someone to consider to be successful as an architect?
Skills. Uh, you have to be able to take a lot of criticism. I don't know if I would even call
Well,
that a
that's in
skill,
school.
but right. That's in school, but even after, interpersonal skills, working with other people, is a skill that you should take seriously. In college, I remember we used to kick and scream when we had a professor who we wouldn't particularly get along with. But in real life, you're going to have clients who you may not 100% see eye to eye with certain things on, and you might have to use your personable skills to extract information out of them and have a productive dialogue to arrive at a good design conclusion. There's millions of ways that as a skill can help in your career. Um, to there's a lot of discussion about drawing. Do you need to be good at drawing to be an architect? It's one of those
Right.
things where, as a skill, it definitely helps. It definitely helps to be able to just draw like a quick idea, whether you're in like concept design or SD, or even if you're working out a detail for something.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that you have to be, yeah, like this amazing artist. You just have to be able to convey ideas, which I think is a skill in its own.
Right.
Being able to draw in a way that is like architectural, um, not necessarily that you're drawing a masterpiece, polished 3D rendering perspective type thing. But yeah, I would say it helps to have drawing as a skill. And then in general, just you need to be tenacious. You need to have this problem solving ability, because it seems like in every project there's thousands of hurdles. There's thousands of things that the site might not want a building, because you have a slope on the site, and you have shallow bedrock, so you can't go so deep, so you have to have some levels to the building, and you have to have ADA ramps, and oh well, do I have my exits? Like, you need to be good at balancing all of these factors, like hundreds of factors, and building your mental library of just a seemingly endless amount of information. Code, climate, constructability, beauty. You need to be able to synthesize all those things, because that synthesizing everything is what makes your project great, right?
Right.
So yeah, I would say, however you would describe that as a skill,
Oh,
but those things are important to
it's a
have.
skill. It's an aptitude as well. Now, we got a great question from the crowd as far as alternative paths to becoming licensed. Do you have any recommendations or experience with that?
That's a long list. I think one of the I guess the question is more so like what can you do as an architect that's not licensed? Like, you can still be a designer, like a building designer. Depending on what state you're in, you might be able to design a house, and not need a stamp for it, or maybe a structural engineer can stamp it. It depends on the state. I don't know how it is in your state, but I think in like Wisconsin or something, like, you don't need a architect's seal for anything less than X square feet. So you can still be a designer, of buildings, but you can't call yourself an architect, whatever. That I have opinions on that. Aside from that, I think one of the most straightforward paths is getting into, 3D rendering. You can have a 3D render service, where you could do anything from video walkthroughs to obviously like photorealistic renderings, or you could just be a BIM person, a Revit, a building information modeling type of draftsman, like a 3D draftsman.
Right.
That's always going to be in demand. Unfortunately, though, I think in the United States, if you are going to go the render option, you might have some competition from other countries, because I know in my office we sometimes outsource renderings to like this Russian company, and for $400 they will get you like this insane rendering overnight, like that for $400. So you'll have to be competitive with your pricing. But yeah, I know people that went into interior design. I know people that went into real estate, um, started doing tile. Like you can, there's many things that you can go into. It depends. It really just depends on how close you want to stay to architecture and how far away you're willing to veer off.
Right, right. Well, excellent comments and suggestions. Not sure about. I'm not ready to send my renderings off to Russia to be taken care of. Uh, but
Fair enough.
we've got a great question from Rob Kling. Do you feel that a high school student looking at architecture should go and visit some different firms?
Yeah, definitely. Um, Whenever you have the opportunity. I remember when I was in high school, I actually reached out to an architect in my neighborhood, some in suburban New Jersey where I was living. And I don't think I visited the office, but we had a conversation. It was I was asking him questions that a 17-year-old kid would ask. I remember what I asked, but to just go to a firm, I think is also helpful. Um, to go to a couple firms because then you get a sense of the culture. Some companies like to play music in the office, like light music as ambient sound. Some companies have models everywhere and drawings everywhere. And I think if you're observational, you can go into a firm and you can kind of pick up on the subconscious things that are happening in the environment. You can even go to a firm and be like, wow, this is kind of miserable. you know, there's there's both sides of the spectrum, and like you should be able to see that,
Right.
because it may sway you in one direction or the other. Definitely helpful if you can do it.
I agree. I agree. I can't tell you how many of my clients, kids, and people I meet out in the community. I try to stay active with different nonprofits and different activities. Uh, and I'll meet people and their kids are considering or want to see what an architect is like. And I invite them to my office, and I'm happy to show them around, show them what I do. And I think that's very important because, and I uh, sort of preface when they come to my office, I'm not like every other office. I'm my own office, and they're their own office. Or each there's so many different personalities in offices. So at any rate, Matt, we're over an hour, so we're going to answer a few more
Is it
questions.
mine?
Matt, you're at 1.9 million likes. All right, that's awesome. That's awesome. I beat you in years and age, but you beat me by how many likes you get. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. So, with exposure and reputation, tell us how you use social media and how has that affected your reputation and your exposure as an architect?
It definitely affects your reputation because, right? I mean, architecture as a profession, it's a very tight knit community. Everyone seems to know everyone, and I don't know how it is by you, but in Philly, it's you know, that if this person's working here, oh, did you hear that? They moved to this firm, and oh, did you see that this firm is doing that project, and this guy was the PM. He went to Philly U. He was a teacher here.
Right?
Um, and when you're on social media, when you kind of build a platform like this, you kind of inadvertently like insert yourself into those conversations. Like when I was getting hired at my current position, there were people in the office that were like, "Oh, I follow you on TikTok," and like I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then part of me was like, "Oh, wow, that's." It was kind of like a reality check, and it's like it's whatever. I mean, TikTok is a very localized platform. So if you post something in, I live in the Fishtown neighborhood. Um, People all the time, I'm posting something as I'm walking around. I'm like looking at houses. People are like, "Oh, you just walked by my house." I'm like, "That's kind of crazy. That's kind
Yeah.
of weird." But I think that
You're being
connectivity,
stalked.
right? It feels like that sometimes. And it's just like, oh, it's kind of it's kind of strange. But in terms of building a reputation, you know, you are your reputation in this field. And it's, for me, it's a platform that I kind of use to express my thoughts on the built environment, my thoughts on my home renovation, my thoughts on buildings that are getting built. It's I guess it's like a almost like a visual blog, if you will. But I mean, it's or like a visual portfolio, you could say too, because like sometimes I post my work. It's yeah, it's been interesting, definitely. I think if I had my own practice, there are things that I would be able to do with this platform that I probably can't do right now, just because I do work for a company. And like, if I am going to post something regarding one of my projects, it's like, is the client okay with this? I got to get some approvals. I don't want to
Right.
step on
Right.
some
Mhm.
toes. There's a layer that I don't want to mess with. Um, and then somebody just mentioned about LinkedIn. So I just started posting some of my content on LinkedIn, as a way to try to kind of spread the firm name and try to see if we can get more jobs in Philly. And I think if you're doing any kind of educational content, LinkedIn is a great platform. Um,
Right.
TikTok is a mix. You have anything from what you and I do, and educational architecture content, to trends and dances and people doing pranks in public. So it's definitely a mixed demographic on TikTok. But I think trying to use this almost as the platform for video curation and then moving it onto other platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn, I think definitely help. So,
All right. Well, I've got two more questions for you. One is, can you share with viewers that aren't familiar necessarily with you, Architect Talk, how can they learn about your work, follow your work, and follow your platform?
well, you can, the easiest way is go to my profile and hit the follow button. And I haven't been posting that much lately. I mean, life gets busy, and like I said, I'm renovating my house, and it seems to take a lot of my time. Um, But other than that, yeah, I mean, follow me on any of the social media sites like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's all on my profile in my link in bio. Um, Kind of, if you know my handle, Architect Talk, then you know where to find me.
Well,
So
great. Well, are there any questions I haven't asked you that you'd like to wish I'd asked you, and you can answer it now?
that that you haven't asked me? No,
Yeah.
I might have some questions for you. I mean, I don't want to take too much of your time. I mean, you did answer some of it with kind of starting out in the firm. I feel like it's every architect's dream at some point to start their own practice. Um,
It's hard, and I encourage it, but it is difficult.
what's like, yeah,
Well,
what was one of the like hardest moments in you kind of taking off in your own personal practice in having your own company?
the hardest thing, being able to wrestle with clients differently than my professors. So when I had professors, the professor ruled. He controlled your grade, he controlled what the assignment was, and you learned to figure out what the professor wanted. When you get into your own practice, there's some other agendas that come into play.
Oh, you've got a good quote you use.
All right.
Your
And
success is determined.
oh, and I've actually gave a seminar at an AIA conference in San Francisco on this, and it was, I owe my success not to the clients I kept, but to the clients I fired. All right, I'm
Cool.
serious.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
serious. One client, especially when you do custom residential, they have way more resources than you have. Right? I'm not Philip Johnson, right? So I don't have Alcoa aluminum is my birthright. I've got, a wonderful family, but one strong client can wipe you out. So if it's you need to understand that there are other agendas at play other than just you pleasing that client. All right. I've
Mm.
had a developer I work for that I learned a big lesson from. And when I have a residential client now, I'll give them 4 iterations of schematics. That's it. They pay extra if they want more. Because I had a developer, as you can see, the agenda. Well, let's see how many other ideas I can get out of this guy, right?
Right.
Yeah. And you see these houses or those concepts showing up somewhere else. That's fine. I've got plenty of concepts. I'm not short on concepts, but I don't want to be paid once and give away 20 concepts, And he just kept coming back. Well, let's change this. Let's change this. Let's change this. And so that was another thing. But the clients you keep, they have to. It has to be a good fit for you. And so before I accept a client, one, they apply, and you can check on my. It took me a long time to learn this, right? But a lot of school of hard knocks. But if anyone is interested in starting their own firm, and Matt, you in particular, give me a call. I'll share with you as much as I can. An open book on this one. Filter your clients. Who you are a good fit for, and who's a good fit for you? Because I happily say, I'm not the right architect for every project, and every project's not the right one for me. Learn to value yourself. And this is where the professors get in the way. Everything I was taught in school and did well in school, sometimes you have to buck the system, which with all your tattoos, I would imagine you have no problem with that, which is great. So, and that's a good strength, a good quality you came out of the box with. So value yourself and charge your dollars. Charge for the value you create, because it is important. That is something you offer that no one else is. If I design a house and you design a house, they're going to be 2 different houses. And they're going to meet the needs of the client in 2 different ways. And so your personality needs to meld with the client, and mine will as well. But the client needs to also pick and decide who's best. And there's 2 ways to work. When my wife was in law school, you can work for free, and you can work to be not paid, or you can not work and not be paid. All right. Well, when I was a professor, I used to call myself a gentleman architect because I would do pro bono work on a big scale and get no pay, but I'd be on national TV for the event. Right? So yes, I did get paid. And so I owe a lot of my success to the clients that did not pay me. Right? It's because
But you choose who doesn't pay.
But I chose who that was going to be. Okay.
That's an interesting bit of information as we talk about even architects using social media, architects using TikTok, because that's one of the reasons why I do this is because you're inadvertently building, if not a client base, you're building rapport, you're building you're building credibility for yourself.
Exactly. Right.
So that you're kind of eliminating some of the unknown factor that when somebody goes to hire you and oh, this is how much I cost, if that number, if that dollar is what you're worth, and it's a considerable dollar, you've already proven without doing anything, without just kind of having done this educational content posting, what you're doing, you've already proved yourself way before that potential client was even calling you, or this project was even a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, architecture students and young architects, like, post your work, talk about your work, join the conversation, like TikTok, hopefully it stays, hopefully it doesn't get banned, but just social media as a whole, like, if more people that are contributing to this conversation, it's not about numbers, it's not about likes, but when I have somebody that reaches out to my email and like asks me for advice, like, I will give advice, like, to a student who's like struggling or something, and because I was there, you know what I mean? And like it's about giving back to that community. It's like, it's so important. I love doing it, and it's like I don't expect to get paid.
That's great. And Matt, you do a great job of it, and a rising tide lifts all ships. I think this is wonderful. And so what I'd like to do is talk about my next TikTok Live. It'll be in 2 weeks. Monday, April 1st, April Fools. I'm not fooling. It's actually going to be a real serious TikTok Live. And I'm going to do a fix the floor plan. And this will be a fix the floor plan with a house. It was built in the 1920s. I didn't add a single square foot to it, but I updated it from the 1920s to current lifestyles. And I would love to share that on my TikTok live. Matt, you have another one coming up? Can you mention? Or?
At this time, I don't. I'm actually going to Barcelona, May the 26th. So I'm going to be away for 2 weeks.
Oh, wonderful! Well, I
So
love Barcelona. It's
oh,
fabulous.
nice. Yeah, my fiance and I are going. We're so excited. So like I don't have anything planned after that. I am trying to schedule. There's a home builder from Georgia, Renard Realty or Reynard Builders, does really awesome custom homes. He wanted to chat, and I would love to have a chat with him. I don't know if it's going to be a live kind of thing, but um, yeah, I'm open to doing more of these. Like this was great.
This
I would
is
love to talk with anyone else, on the platform. There's so many of us. It's like we got a
yeah,
little community. It's like you.
that's good.
There's TikTok Architect. There's Dory, Arch Guide. Cam
Fuente.
Snipes. Yeah, send me your review, your portfolio. I'll take a look at it.
That sounds
But yeah,
great.
would love to do
Matt,
more.
thank you so much. It's been a great sport. You're in a great spot looking at this, and thank you for helping out an old man. And if anybody would like to go live with me, send me a note. Send me a note on my either TikTok or on my website. So look, thank you again, Matt, and keep up the good work. Great attitude. Love your post, and I'll keep following.
Thanks, Kevin. Hope we can meet in person one day.
I look forward to it. It'll be soon. It'll be soon.
Yes,
All right.
sir.
Bye bye.
All right. Have a good night, man. Bye.